When the Raptors traded away OG Anunoby, it was to protect themselves from his upcoming free agency, a problem that the Knicks are now facing with the player, so much so that the Raptors could actually make a push to re-sign the player in free agency. Let's get into it. When the Raptors and Knicks engaged in the blockbuster trade that sent OG Anunoby to New York, the wide consensus and expectation was that Anunoby was just going to simply re-sign with the New York Knicks. There were some question marks about whether or not he was going to be with the Raptors long term, based on the fact that the Raptors were trying to rebuild, and there were some questions over his contract. There was questions over the valuation of that contract and if the Raptors would have the ability to retain him as a free agent. So, not wanting to lose a player for completely nothing, as they have done with some previous key players, the Raptors sent him over to the New York Knicks, didn't want to worry about that contract situation, instead brought back Barrett and Immanuel Quickley, and that trade has looked to be a very good deal for the Raptors, but also a very good deal for the New York Knicks. It's been widely considered to be a win-win trade, but all of this, again, was under the presumption that OG was just going to stay with the Knicks, re-sign, and get a new contract there. But now some new reports suggest that potentially that is not the case, and Anunoby could actually test free agency this summer. These reports come from one of the most credible sources in NBA media, and we're going to get to in just a second here. But before we do, reminder, this is Amateur Sports, the YouTube channel dedicated to Toronto Raptors coverage in live streams and in videos just like this. Drop a like if you enjoy this one along the way, and subscribe to the channel as well. So if you know my content, you know I am a big fan of Brian Windhorst's content, and I also very much respect him as an NBA source. I'm not sure you could name more than 2 or 3 sources that are more credible than Brian Windhorst. So when he says something, you really have to believe it here. And he mentioned recently on ESPN's Get Up that the expectation certainly is that OG Anunoby is going to re-sign with the New York Knicks, but that potentially may not be the case over some issues over the amount of money being offered towards the player. And not only did Brian Windhorst say this, but Jay Williams has also heard the same, and he mentioned it on the show as well. So troubles could be brewing with the Knicks here, because they may not want to pay up with the amount of money that OG Anunoby is going to be wanting. The Knicks certainly have turned a corner here and are looking to continue to push towards being a contender and a threat towards an NBA championship. OG Anunoby should be, in theory, a big part of that, but all of this is slightly confusing to me, because why would the New York Knicks trade for OG without the understanding of how much it's actually going to cost to retain him? OG, finally got the credit that he deserved for the caliber of player he is and type of player that he is after moving to the Knicks. Long had Raptors fans been singing his praises as a player that could be a key piece or the missing piece of many championship puzzles. If the New York Knicks had stayed healthy, then they potentially could have challenged a Boston Celtics team in an Eastern Conference Finals, but they could not really stay healthy. And a bit of a reason why was OG Anunoby's health, which has always been questionable, even in the pre-draft process. Part of the reason he fell to a point where the Raptors could select him was some injury concerns. So the Knicks had to have this full understanding of the player when they brought him into the team. Now, perhaps what they hadn't considered is the rise in popularity of the player that he would receive, playing in the mecca of basketball, where much more media attention is given towards. So naturally, OG, a very good player, finally in the media limelight, got the attention he deserved. But again, the Knicks had to have the understanding that there were going to be a litany of teams lining up to try and give OG Anunoby his next contract here, and there was never an agreement in place, and there never will be an agreement in place, unless it's, like a handshake agreement behind the scenes, that the player is going to return. So what is the actual valuation that OG Anunoby should be expecting in free agency? It's being reported right now that pretty much the floor for OG is going to be around $35 million per year. But if you guys have been tuning into the content on this channel, Amateur Sports, for the last year and a half, I've continuously tried to express that you need to be comfortable with the reality that, not only are we going to be talking in the mid-30s for OG here, there's a possibility, and it's a very distinct possibility at that there's going to be such a lineup of teams here that is going to turn into a bit of a bidding war that could see OG enter at least $40 million per year conversations. And there is a potential that a team is so desperate to lure a player of OG Anunoby's quality that they might be prepared to offer him a max contract. Perhaps the Raptors weren't as prepared to enter these discussions. That's why they decided to trade away the player. And for a player on an expiring contract, they got a phenomenal return with RJ Barrett, Immanuel Quickley, and, well, also the 31st overall pick in the upcoming NBA draft. That is looking better by the day, especially in this situation here. So for OG Anunoby and his position, well, it does make sense for him to want to test the free agent market. As I said, there are some injury issues for OG. So maximizing his value to the best of his abilities is a fruitful endeavor here. To get a long-term contract on a lot of money protects himself from wherever his NBA career goes. I mean, hopefully it's a long and prosperous and healthy NBA career, but OG's got to prepare himself for whatever situation arises. And honestly, his most recent NBA contract with the Raptors was one of the league's very best. In fact, it was such a good contract that the Raptors couldn't re-sign him in advance because the contract was so low, and you can only go up a certain percentage on the next contract, which would have been in the range of $29 million, which OG Anunoby was just not going to sign because he was far too good for that. But part of the reason, again, the Raptors traded him is that they were worried about the lineup of teams that were going to be there to try and sign him in free agency. Well, as this situation kind of spills out, the Toronto Raptors could be one of those teams that gets in line and provides him an offer. Look, we have the security now of RJ Barrett and Immanuel Quickley that we don't really need to worry about this free agency, about the types of players the Raptors could lose. There is the Bruce Brown situation that's ongoing for sure. There is the Gary Trent Jr. situation that's ongoing as well. That's not a dire need, I think, to bring back Gary Trent Jr. That money could come off the books. A Bruce Brown trade could see that money come off the books, which could provide the Raptors a suitable runway to make a really big push to bring in OG Anunoby. I think, to preface this, it's very unlikely that this would be the case, but I think it'd be ludicrous for the Raptors front office not to at least try, not to at least send an offer his way and get involved with the type of teams that could offer him. The Raptors could be a player here. The Philadelphia 76ers, who have opened up a ton of cap space, could absolutely be a player here. And the New York Knicks should be a player here as well. But if OG is starting to creep into $40 million territory, maybe even max contract territory, if there is some worry over his health on the New York side of things, and perhaps a bigger role could be offered somewhere else, then I can very much see OG Anunoby leaving the Knicks and signing for a different team. And absolutely, the Raptors will have the financial capability. And perhaps, look, he's been here before. He's enjoyed his time in Toronto before. He already knows the team. The team has improved since he left because we got good players when he left, and we're just going to add him onside those players. This would be one of the biggest fleeces in NBA history if Masai Ujiri's front office could pull this off. Again, I don't really see this happening. I see OG Anunoby signing elsewhere to the Toronto Raptors if he does actually test free agency, but he could also test free agency and just remain with the New York Knicks. I think that the best thing that OG should do in this situation is test free agency, see what sort of offers are out there, and come back to the Knicks and say, look, there are teams out there willing to give me this amount of money. If you're not going to pay up, I don't really owe you anything here. You traded for me. You knew the situation. You knew it was an expiring contract. I don't owe this team anything. If you want to keep me, you need to pay up. And in the end, I think the Knicks will understand that they're kind of handcuffed in this spot. It would look really poor on them to sacrifice those assets to bring in OG just to not re-sign him. So in the end, what will likely happen is the Knicks re-sign the player. But when it comes to free agency, we truly just never know. And if the Raptors had anybody they wanted to make a serious push for, that player should be OG. Every team is looking for defense. Every team is looking for shooting. You have an extremely efficient three-point shooter in OG Anunoby and one of the league's, maybe the league's best perimeter defender, very much one of the best defenders in the entire National Basketball Association. If you don't have OG Anunoby on your team, you're just going to spend all of your time looking for somebody just like him to fill that void. So the Raptors, full steam ahead and trying to make this one happen, as unlikely as it may be, but perhaps it's got a lot more potential than some previous free agents. We'll monitor the situation closely here on Amateur Sports to see how it unfolds, but this trade that looked really good for the Raptors might start to look even better in the very near future. So what do you make of this whole OG Anunoby fiasco? Where do you see the player ending up for next season? Give me all of your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below. That's all for me for today. Drop a like if you enjoyed the video. Make sure you subscribe to Amateur Sports for more content just like this, and I will see you again next time for another video.